apple turnover dough. In the bowl I have 6 cups of all-purpose flour, and I'm going to add 1/4 cup and 2 tablespoons of sugar, then 2 teaspoons of salt. Stir it up. I have this in a metal container because I'm going to refrigerate the dry ingredients along with the wet ingredients, the butter as well, so that when I work with my dough, it's very cold and the butter does not melt. Alright, so this goes into the fridge. In the pitcher I have 2 cups of cold water. Then I'll add 1 tablespoon plus 1 teaspoon of apple cider vinegar, and this too I will place in the fridge. I'm going to start with 2 cold sticks of unsalted butter, or sweet cream butter. It has a little bit of salt, but not as much salt as the box labeled salted butter. So we'll just halve and halve. For this recipe, I'm going to use a total of, a total of 4 sticks of butter. And then I'm going to freeze 2 sticks for an hour. And 30 minutes later, I'll add another 2 sticks of cubed butter to the freezer. That way I have large chunks, pea-sized chunks of butter and smaller pieces of butter in my dough. Okay, so this here, you see I've labeled this bag 60 minutes. And this goes into the freezer right now. For the other 2 sticks of butter, I'm going to cube those as well. Now if you freeze your butter too long, for 2 hours let's say, the butter will be too hard and won't incorporate well into the flour. Not that you want the butter pieces to incorporate completely, but butter that's frozen for too long just does not work for this particular dough. And if you don't freeze your butter at all, it will be incorporated into the flour too much, which is also not what I want for this particular dough. So I do several different variations on turnovers. In Guam we call them pustet, which is a baked turnover, or butsi butsi, which is fried. And I found that depending on the filling, I like a different type of dough. So this dough is buttery, it's flaky, it's got a little bit of chew, but it's a great cross between a croissant and pie dough. Now, 30 minutes, I'll put this in the fridge for now until 30 minutes have passed from when I put the other bag of butter in. Then I'll add this to the freezer. Into the bowl of your food processor, scrape half of the dry mixture. We're going to layer that with butter. So this is half of the butter I froze for 30 minutes. And half of the butter that was frozen for an hour. And then the rest of the dry ingredients. This food processor bowl is not big enough to add the water, so I'm just going to pulse the butter in here. Okay, start the mixture or the food processor blade somewhat in the middle speed, and then you can go fast once some of the butter gets all mixed up. I'm going to start with mixing the dough using a fork as opposed to my hand until the mixture starts to form a little bit of a dough-like consistency. That way the warmth in my hand doesn't melt the butter so much. It's starting to get to a consistency where I want to use my hand and just press the dough as you incorporate that water. There is a slight chance that you can make this too watery, so you really have to be mindful of how much water you're adding. And press that dough against itself. You just want it to barely come together. We're almost there. When you put this in the fridge, the dough gets a little bit more moist. So you don't want to make this too wet. All of the 2 cups of water. Okay, I'm happy with how this looks. That was enough. It's a little dry at the bottom, but once you squeeze this together from the bottom, it'll hold its shape, and as you roll it out, it'll come together. So if you're not excited about the little scrap down there, just squeeze it together, it'll be fine. Okay? Divide this into fourths and wrap each fourth separately, then put it in the fridge for 30 minutes. Ooh, let the fun begin. So what you want to do is flour your work surface very well, your rolling pin, and you want just enough dough to make 1 turnover, about 1/4 of an inch thick, a little under, not as thin as 1/8 of an inch, but not much thicker than 1/4. So this dough was in the fridge 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and it doesn't get hard as some recipes do. So it's very soft. If you have stuff that comes up, you can leave it in the fridge for a couple hours. I wouldn't do it overnight. I've actually tried that before. It's okay. A little tough for the finished turnover. The kids didn't notice, but I could tell the difference. If you can just make your turnovers the same day you make your dough, that's best. If not, and something really comes up and you just can't get to it, it's okay. Most people probably couldn't tell the difference. It's got a little more chew than turnovers made with freshly prepared dough. So here I'm rolling this just out. I always like to flour my surface, pick the dough up as I go, just so it doesn't stick. That looks like it's big enough. I have this very old pot cover. It's about 5.5 inches in diameter. And this batch of dough makes around 30 pieces of turnovers using this size. So I took the scraps, covering it lightly on my stack of dough to the left here, You can see the butter, right? So here is that delicious apple filling I made yesterday. I accidentally put more cinnamon than normal. That's what happens when you talk on the phone as you're prepping your ingredients. But it works. I really like it. So, you know, it's up to you how much cinnamon you want to put in your filling. From 1 tablespoon to 2.5. It works. It's good. Okay, I have a cup of water, just room temp water, the spoon, and there's enough water here to moisten the edges of this dough. So you don't want to pour, just enough stays on the spoon. And fold it over. Alright, press it. The shorter your nails are, the better. Okay, so I use this pastry dough, or this turnover dough, for a couple of different fillings. It works. And I usually seal the edges with the tines of a fork, right? But because I've already made turnover with a chicken a la king filling, it's like a, what do you call that, chicken pot pie filling. And I use the fork to seal the edges. I'm just going to roll this into like a rope shape. And I don't have to mark the top. I also use this dough for like a bacon cheesy scrambled egg mixture, almost like a Hot Pocket. And I marked that. I sealed that dough with a fork, and I marked that with a little bit of yellow food coloring. Dipped the toothpick in a tiny bit of yellow coloring. That's how I distinguish, you know, what's in my freezer. I have a tiny bit of scrap left from that first turnover. Now I want just enough of the fresh dough to roll 1 turnover, because you don't want to continue to roll your scraps of dough, otherwise it won't be flaky. So that looks enough to me. And I don't want to roll it so thin, so I'm not going to use the pot cover to shape this. I'm just going to kind of roll it out into a rough circle or rectangle. I just pulled this pan of apple turnovers out of my freezer, and I'm going to pick 8 and bake them up today. You can store the remaining turnovers in 2 layers of freezer gallon bags. In the bowl, I mixed 1 large egg yolk and about a tablespoon or slightly less of milk. You can use whatever milk you have in the fridge. 2% is what I normally keep. And then just brush an egg wash, is what this is called, over each turnover. They're done, and it smells buttery, cinnamony in my house. Let the turnovers cool on the rack for a couple of minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, which they've already done. Then you take them off and scoop them onto another cooling rack. If you're going to serve turnovers, you know, as a meal, you can use these small square racks, I'll show you in a minute, to line the top of an adult dinner plate and then serve it right there. You know, saves you some dishes to clean up. Okay, so this is what I do, right? An adult dinner plate, if I'm doing breakfast, they get an apple turnover and some savory turnover. So 2 or 1.5 depends. And then just put these square racks right on top of the plate, and it works, you know. You get the serving dish and not another tray to clean up. But there you go. It's all done. I like this a little closer to room temperature, not so hot, but it's up to you.